Good evening. This is Paranormal Science Lab Live. I'm Lisa.
I'm John.
And we are pleased to have with us tonight Steven LaChance. Steven, how are you doing?
I'm doing great. How are you all? Kind of snowy here.
Yeah, we're in Arctic temperatures and sleet and snow.
It was negative 11 wind chill, and it's sleeting and snowing outside and acting crazy.
Yeah, I know. It's like, we're in March, folks.
Yeah, but around here we've been known to get 27 inches of snow in March. So
I know. People forget that up here too in St. Louis. They think, okay, it's March, it's time for spring, and it's like, no, don't you remember? We get foots of snow.
Yeah, it's.
That's right. Now, Steven, did I hear that you are looking to move again?
I'm buying a house.
Awesome.
I'm buying a house. Everybody was like, Steven, you just moved, and I'm like, yeah, we moved because our lease was up on our apartment, and he didn't like cats anyway, so we moved in a temporary house while I went looking because I decided I wanted to buy. I'm going to buy one of those old brickstone houses in St. Louis, the ones that St. Louis is kind of known for. So I've been out looking like every Wednesday, but I think this Wednesday I might contract a house, so keep your fingers crossed.
Very cool, very cool.
I'm looking at one, Lisa, that's a World's Fair house. 3,000 square feet. It's a World's Fair house, like Meet Me in St. Louis. You ever see Meet Me in St. Louis? Those kind of houses. So
awesome.
Really, really cool. Really cool.
Was around a lot of those when I went to law school up there. So
you know what I'm talking about.
Yeah.
So I'm looking at everything from the brick bungalows to those type of houses. So we'll see what I do.
Hey, a comment from the chat room, Steven, is that we hope the new house isn't haunted.
Everybody says that. They think that if you manage to find a haunted house one time, you're going to find it again. Which the truth of the matter is there's some truth to that. Mm-hmm. I was at a house this past Wednesday, and we walked in, and I had two real estate agents with me. I had mine, and she had a gentleman she was training. And we walked by this closet, and the closet door opened in front of us. And I looked at him and shook my head no. And this guy, he was closing the closet, opened it, closing the closet, open. And I was just like, no, they have, it was letting me know it was there, so no, we're not going to do that one. But, chances are, with that kind of home, you're looking at homes that were built in, the late 1800s. Early 1900s in St. Louis, because we don't tear anything down, we renovate everything. So is the possibility there? Sure. Is it a possibility that would be haunted? I don't mind a ghost. Just don't give me no demons.
Yeah.
Right.
There's a good haunting and a bad haunting.
But the chances of moving into haunting like the Screaming House haunting again would be like winning Powerball like 3 times in a row, because those hauntings are so rare that, you just don't find them that often. So, that won't happen, I promise.
Steven, when you read Uninvited, it's pretty clear that, paranormal was completely off your radar at that point in your life.
Yeah.
What would you advise people when they are looking for a house?
Well, I was talking to, it was kind of funny, I was talking to the real estate agent the other day about this, because she was like, I'm like, if people don't walk in front of your house and they cross the street of your property line, your house is probably haunted. If you walk into a house and there's an overabundance of you could tell there's an overabundance of crosses hanging in the home. Probably haunted. If the deal is too good to be true, really easy. You're standing there going, "Wow, this house is great," but wow, it's so cheap. Probably haunted. There's a lot of things like that you look at, and just how you feel in a house. A house embraces you, or it doesn't embrace you. And it's like you pay attention to what you're doing when you're inside it, everything. If you got angels hanging on the walls, which with the Screaming House had angels in the living room all across the top of it, and it's like, I probably should have turned and ran right then, but I did not know what I know now, so If they're too anxious to get you to do it, if they try to make you feel like you've won the lottery and you're the most special person in the world to get this house, turn around and walk the other way.
I found too that a real good question to ask is how many times have people moved in and out in the last 5 years?
Oh, I know, but that is public record too, especially when you're buying a house. When I look at a house, I'm like, if I see something that's been sold every 2-3 years, I saw one house that was sold every one. It was funny because I didn't tell Elliot that, and I was showing Elliot this house, and Elliot looks at it and he goes, "No, that house is haunted." You can tell it from the pictures. And I was like, and then I told myself, this house has been sold every year for like the past 5 years. You can tell, pay attention to the county records, or the city records. They're there, and they're going to tell you exactly what the house is. If you had a house that sold for $160,000 in 2013, and then you turn around and it's $70,000 in 2014, chances are there's a reason for it, whether it's paranormal or not.
Either that, or there's a crack in the foundation going to China or something. Yeah.
Or bad pipes underneath.
That's right. One thing, Stephen, that was kind of a unique experience you had dealing with that house when the next people moved in is dealing with the church. What was that like?
Church was interesting. They apologized for their behavior, Lisa. That's why the Roman Catholic Church came out with a report on the haunting in 2012, which is very unusual for the church to do, to discuss something like that publicly, which they have now, because they felt like they didn't get to us soon enough, and the help that they got to us was not properly done. I mean, the blessing that was done from the first priest that went in the house was very, very, very haphazard. As a matter of fact, I can remember watching him run down the walkway to his car. I mean, he wanted out. It's funny, if you watch Fear House, I love this part in Fear House. If you watch a haunting on television, you see the Fear House story about the screaming house. You'll see he's terrified in the house. Well, it was kind of like that, because he kind of ran out, and as he was leaving, the pounding was going on above us. I mean, it was so obvious that whatever he did was not right, and we knew it wasn't right because we had talked to Lorraine Warren. Lorraine Warren was the first one that said, you got a demon in there and you need to get it out. This is how you need to do it. She told us exactly the process that we needed to go through before the blessing, and the process that blessing needed to go through to do what it was supposed to do. He did none of it. Even when we confronted him and say, hey, you need to do this, this, and this, he still did none of it. And that's why you got your apology from the church later on, because, obviously it blew up in such mega proportions that, the church came forward and said, man, we're sorry we didn't get to you in time. We're sorry that the help you did give wasn't proper. I really, really hold the church in high regard from that. It's not so bad much that you make the mistake, but that you stand up and say, hey, I made the mistake. I do that. I mean, you read The Uninvited. I do that in The Uninvited. I say, don't do what I did here because it's wrong and it didn't work, and look at the end result. If you do that with people, the education process is so much more valuable. And I think we need to learn from each other, and that's really important. So you got to give kudos to the church for that as well, because they don't necessarily like to learn lessons like that too often.
Or at least admit it.
Or at least admit it, yeah, exactly.
Well, and it reminds me very much of the experience that Ed Marcia Becker had with the church, except for they didn't get that report later and say, where they said, we
right.
need to take care of this soon enough, etc.
And I think that is the change that we're seeing now. Obviously, the church is training more exorcists than they ever have before, and we're also seeing stuff like them being able to admit that there's a problem as well. So that's cool.
What made you decide, after going through that kind of experience, which is pretty extreme, in the realm of paranormal, to say, okay, now I'm going to become an investigator?
Well, becoming an investigator and starting the Paranormal Task Force, Missouri Paranormal Research, was kind of forced upon me, because I remember sitting there at one point, because we had psychics brought in and everything. The first psychic we had brought to the house, she was lifted off the floor about 5 inches and thrown across the room. You know that. So yeah. I mean, the help that we were trying to get. At one point, Linda, who was the Lieutenant Helen in the book, she looked at me and she was crying. She was crying, and she looked at me and she said, Stephen, I could take anybody in from the street in 10 minutes, put them in this house, and they would tell me it's haunted. The problem is we cannot put them in this house and them tell us how to fix it. And at that point, we decided to fix it ourselves. Not a wise move, but at that point, the ghost renaissance had really got rolling. I mean, so we kind of had to. I mean, we had no choice. However, we were lucky at one point, because you had people like Lorraine Warren step in, and John Zaffis, and Father Ricardo Reese from the Vatican. Some of the best help you could get. I look back at it and see how horrible it was, but I have to wonder just how horrible it would have gotten without them,
Well, you were blessed with some very able help there.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
Stephen, what's the biggest lesson you've learned on your road down the paranormal path?
Ooh, I've learned so many. I've learned so many social lessons. Above all, the thing is I've learned, people, when they talk to me and they say, well, in the beginning you were a skeptic. No, I just, like Lisa said, it just wasn't on the radar. I think I think I've learned to become, because of the work I do and who I am, I have to be the biggest skeptic in the room now. I think I've learned how to dissimulate from, because people in a haunting situation, everything's paranormal, and I know that feeling, a bump in the night, it becomes paranormal when you're living through stuff like that. So that skepticism has come in to help these families get some sort of grounding, because when you get to them, they're not grounded, they're going here and there and everywhere. I think that's the most important lesson, not only for them, but for myself as well. I mean, looking back, I can say, was this paranormal or was this real? I have that way of doing this now, And not all cases are paranormal, by the way. I've had some very serious cases that were not paranormal cases.
Such as?
I had a case where a little girl, and I talk about this one a lot because it really was a case that showed me the value of what I was doing by helping these families. I had a little girl that was seeing the boogeyman every night. He was crawling through a window. They would find her bruised and all kinds of things in the morning. So they had, they came to me for help. We had her draw the boogeyman. And when she drew him, he had huge genitals on him. Anybody that knows anything about children, we've all been through our psych classes, right?
Right.
Those of us that had to go to college, that was a requirement, and all of us, one of the first things they teach you is a child doing that is sexually abused. Mm-hmm. So the parents staked out the bedroom. Turned out it was the uncle crawling in the bedroom at night with a ski mask, and he was molesting the young girl.
Oh, my.
We stopped that from happening. That was more important than probably anything I've ever done. I looked at that, and at the moment, understanding what we stopped there, and how we changed this child's life by stopping it and giving her some peace. Obviously, there's going to be a lot of work that's going to be done because of the events. But I think it taught me that, that the non-paranormal events are just as important as the paranormal events. And what the work we're doing is so much far-reaching than just a bump in the night.
Well, and I think that's one thing that I think needs to be stressed, too, is that to really do this work well, you have to wear a lot of hats. And an investigator is just one of them.
Love the hat.
So John always has an extra with him. But
I got my Furby hat on right now.
Your Furby hat?
I'm joking.
Man, I was jealous. I want a Furby hat.
Elliot, my son, he's 6'10", and he's 23 years old. And Valentine's Day was coming up. He goes, he was joking with me. He goes, "You don't get I don't get Valentine from you anymore." So this year he got a Furby hat. It's kind of a smart-ass thing to do, but
that's very good.
I'll be expecting that in mail.
Yeah, Stevie, you'll have to tell me where you found one. I'll have to get one. But I think that's something that I think teams really need to be cognizant of, is that they have to be a lot of different things, and just researching the paranormal is just one aspect of it. Stephen, what have you seen a trend for the way that teams are handling cases? Do you think it's getting better or worse?
There's a lot of good work being done out there. A lot of good teams out there. A lot of good people out there. I mean, there's people like me that don't necessarily work, with the team all the time. I work closely with the team that I started, but I don't work with them all the time. There's people like me out there that are doing some very good work. However, because of the nature of what we do and the believability factor of what we do and how people kind of view us from the outside looking in, the people that mess up are amplified so much that they overshadow the people that are doing the good work, and it frustrates me because even in our own culture, we tend to want to talk about the bad more than we want to talk about the good work that's being done, because there's a tremendous amount of good work, and I mean a lot more good work than bad, but it just by nature of what this is, somebody steps in a place they're not supposed to and is trespassing and gets killed, the shot is rung around the paranormal community and around the world. And we forget the people that do things the right way and are good at what they do.
There's been a rash of events recently, in the recent months, of people sort of self-diagnosing a possession, etc., and trying to exorcise family members, etc. What are your thoughts on why are we seeing this trend? I mean, I think there's several factors, but what are your thoughts?
Well, we're seeing, everything on television, Stephen, number one. Number two, we're seeing, when we go to the movies, all of the hauntings that we tend to want to see in film, right or wrong, is demonic. Look at The Conjuring for that, which was a very good film, by the way. Loved it. Very good film. However, I think people, we saw this rash of things when The Exorcist came out. Remember? Everybody was possessed after The Exorcist came out. So I think that's kind of, it kind of goes through its phases where it comes and goes, and it kind of becomes part of our culture. But the problem is you cannot diagnose yourself, because there's a lot of mental illness that can look like possession, number one. Number two, you can't help yourself in these situations, because if you don't know what you're doing, you can really, really mess someone up. If it is a mental illness and you try the exorcism, so forth, that can do damage. I mean, there's so much damage that can be done. Even if they're possessed and you try the exorcism, you can do so much damage. I mean, so all of that said and all of that done, you need to have somebody come in and do an evaluation and do it properly. Proper way to do an evaluation on something like this, and you'll be surprised, the first step is medical. We want to know if there's something medically wrong with that person. We want to make sure they're medically sound. There's a couple of reasons for this. There's a lot of medical situations that can cause hallucination and so forth, number one. Number two, we need to make sure that they're medically sound. If there is an exorcism later on, that they can withstand one. Number three, we go to the psychologist and we take them there. We do a whole profile, psychological profile on them as well. It's a lot of mental illness that can look like possession. Did you realize that there's a situation with bipolar individuals where the eye will dilate like they do in possession, not to the extreme, extremeness of possession, I guess you could say, but it will dilate. So that can be misdiagnosed if it's not looked at properly. So psychological is very, very important. Also, if there are an exorcisms done, you're going to need that psychological backup to deal with the post-traumatic stress and everything that comes after, because there's a lot of that comes. Then the number 3 part is spiritual. After we get down that road, we're at the spiritual aspect of it. And, and then that evaluation's done at that time. But all of this information needs to be done. You can't just, at least I can't walk into a room and look at you and go, oh, Lisa's possessed. Without doing all, without doing all these things, you know what I'm saying? You're kind of dumb,
John may differ, but...
But,
hey,
you got to do the right thing.
Go ahead.
No, it's fine. I'm waiting for you, dude.
Okay. Hey, do you think that the haunting that you went through actually was the cause of, or at very least added to the stress and the heart condition?
You know what? You're one of the rare people that have asked that question.
Actually, it was Eric asked it. I'm just
really. It's a good question, Eric. When I was on my way to one of the surgeries, which would have been a stent at that point that was being put in. My mother I was in the car with my mother, and my mother asked me. She goes, I have to wonder if the work you've been doing with the paranormal is causing this. And at that point, because she pointed out, she goes, look, you got friends that have a lot of the same conditions. She pointed out Keith A. She pointed out Father Andrew at that point had a stroke, which we lost. And there was other people, Tim Yancey and other people, that it was obvious that there's something going on. All these people going through this sort of thing. I can't believe that, we're in our 40s and we could just say, oh, that's just aging. I think we're aging quicker. I look at Carmen Reed. Carmen has her own problems. Physically, they're not necessarily heart. But I got to wonder, yeah, I do. That's why I kind of back away a little bit, yeah.
I think that going into these, and this is just my 2 cents, going into these houses and situations, you have a heightened sense anyway, so your stress is higher no matter whether it be a negative entity or not. So that could cause stress on the heart. I mean, and Eric's right. This particular field could cause, the higher stress levels. I think it's all in how you handle it.
I had an accident, John, in 2005. During the haunting. Right after where the uninvited ends, and that accident, the damage that was caused by that accident, left me with debilitating motor skill problems that you don't see when you see me, because by the time you see me, the medication is kicked in, and it hides. If I'm in an event where I need to speak, and if I have to speak in the morning, I get up even earlier to take the medication to make sure by the time I get to you all, I'm moving a little better and I'm not stuttering. Was that caused by the paranormal too? I believe that one was, because of the freakness of it. So, it was right there the day after Christmas 2005. Really caused some damage. And I don't talk about that too much. And the only reason I don't talk about it too much is I think if you talk about, my heart and all of that and this and that, it kind of becomes a bummer, It's like we all have our shit to deal with,
Yeah.
Right.
Whatever it was caused by, I think that's part of life, and I know Eric's going to ask it, so. I died on the table when my heart when they did the bypass, and then my lung collapsed. It was very serious, very serious. I didn't see the white light while I was out. By the way, I felt myself falling. Lisa, you know this story. I've told it to you before. Mm-hmm. I felt myself slam back into my body, and I mean slam. And at the moment it happened, I had the thought, I know why babies cry when they're born. It hurts. And it didn't hit me. It took me 6 months to figure that was a rebirth statement. That it was the statement that, one morning I woke up and it was clear to me what it meant. What it meant was, you've gone through your life, you've had a lot of hurt, and you go around and complain about your hurt, she left me, with the kids, I've been through this, blah, blah, blah. Life hurts, get over it. You're going to have the rough stuff, and you're going to have the good stuff, but it's the rough stuff that builds your character as well. And I think that's really important as well. So, I learned that through that process of, even in the surgery, I learned some stuff, man. I had a paranormal event happen to me in the hospital as well. I'd have a nun, because I was in there in 9 days, and I would have an old nun, come to see me every morning, and she would go, will you pray with me? And I would pray with her. And as the time went by, I noticed people were kind of rude. They weren't paying attention to her. And I'm like, man, this woman's trying to pray, it was kind of like, shut the hell up. Leave me alone. And I guess it was about the 8th day. My mom was sitting I had a sitting room in my room to the side. It was a real nice hospital, by the way. And I asked her, I said, because the woman's praying, the nun's praying, and I asked her to come over to the bed. And I looked at her and I said, you see the nun, right? And she looks at me and goes, what nun?
Yeah.
And I was like, and then I had to get through the end of the prayer, knowing that this being standing next to me was something otherworldly, whether you want to call it angelic or what. But, it was very, very strange. But however, the paranormal activity has fallen off greatly since 2011, when I had that done and those situations occurred.
Oh, really?
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. There's some that happens every once in a while, but if you ask Edwin and Marsha, they'll tell you there's some that steps in their house every once in a while. That's why we keep our homes blessed, and that's why we keep our relics up. When I told you about the crosses, there's a reason for that,
right.
That people put those up. And one of my favorite things is brand new, is a rosary that Marsha Becker made for me that is absolutely beautiful. It's probably one of my favorite pieces. I have rosaries from around the United States that people have made for me, and those things are very special. I think those hold more power to them because of the intent of when they're given to you. Somebody gives you something and says, I'm giving you this that I made to protect you. Wow, there's some power in that, I think.
Right. Your energy is carried. I believe that. And John and I were just having a conversation earlier today that, activity will come through my house at times. He was talking about something that just happened, and those things just happen, and particularly if you're someone who's a little more sensitive, I think you notice it more.
Yeah, I mean, I see it all the time, just about everywhere I go. But even at my house, it happens. I have things that sit down on the couch and watch TV with me. So
yeah, I mean, I said, I always say, the same thing over and over where this is concerned. Once touched by the Spirit, always touched by the Spirit.
I think
once
almost.
They know you're aware. I don't think there's more activity around you. I think your eyes have opened to the activity around you.
Right, you're more aware of it, and one foot on the other side, so to speak.
Right.
Just touched by it. I agree wholeheartedly. Steve,
I had a cool event happen not too long ago. I'm sorry, Lisa. It was really cool. I was sitting watching TV, and I heard footsteps come up behind me, and then I heard someone whisper in my ear, "Hey, man." Like,
there you go. Yeah. Those things happen, and sometimes they're just passing through, saying hi.
Just saying hi, especially in an apartment building. Apartment buildings are huge places, and those of you that live in apartments that think you're avoiding ghosts, you're not, because you're more likely to experience a ghost in an apartment building than you are a house.
Right.
I think anywhere where there are lots of people go through, you tend to have more spirits, whether it's an apartment building, hospital, anything like that. Schoolhouses.
I mean, think of the places that we find. Look at Waverly. Look at Old South Pittsburgh. There's some of the Swiss Post down. There's one in Iowa that I was at. The one in Iowa that was particularly on it for a school. But it's interesting how those places hold that energy. A lot to be learned from them.
Oh, I do. I think it's a little more complicated than we usually think of it in terms of either ghosts or shadow people, etc. There's the energy travels with people that we don't always acknowledge.
What's funny is when I came out of the screening house haunting for 2 years, the 2 years afterwards, 3 years afterwards, running Paranormal Task Force. Everywhere we went, we captured the most unreal activity. I mean, you've seen some of it, Lisa, from those years of what we did. And it was almost to the point where people stood back and went, holy smokes, what is going on with this team? I don't think it was the team, so to speak, going to the locations. I think it was the birth, of that team in the middle of fire the way it was. And, we all experienced that demonic haunting together because, it's just not one person that experiences a demonic haunting. It's everything, everybody, everyone on that team was experiencing something at home, all that was going with them as well. So I look at the activity that we were capturing during that 2 to 3 year period, and I go, I have to wonder if some of that was brought on because of the demonic haunting that team started with. So,
well, I do think that there are times that whether it's a personal experience or investigating that you, for lack of a better way of putting it, become more apparent to spirit as well. Mm-hmm. They tend to be attracted. It's not exactly. It's not limited to a location either.
And after being through that, I think we came out of that very open to whatever was out there, and everywhere we went, man. I mean, look at the Zombie Road footage or the Pythian Castle footage. I mean, I'm just quoting some of the television stuff we did. There was so much more that happened than you guys saw on television. I mean, we went through some freaky stuff, and I gotta wonder, if it was because of the openness of that beginning haunting that caused that for us, and it took a while to get over it.
I imagine it did have something to do with it. Kind of going in that vein, Stephen, for those, I know a lot of people are very familiar with the Screaming House, but can you give the viewers a little rundown of the haunting that's featured in Crazy?
Oh, the truck stop, my favorite haunting. We got a surprise, don't we, on that one, Lisa? That's coming. But that haunting, it was a truck stop. There was some, I looked at it because I wanted to do something different. So I looked at it from a psychic point of view, and I actually used sensitives in that haunting. In the research that I did through sheriff's departments and so forth, and then word of mouth. So it became very important that the evidence that was presented had to come from two sources. It never came from one source; it came from two sources. Sort of like and I took this case like an FBI profiler would, and I really profiled it because I thought, there's so much more to be learned in the history and what caused the haunting than the haunting itself. And when you look at Crazy, that is exactly what you learn. You learn a lot about what that history did and how it molded the haunting. Because I believe that when you look at that truck stop, and people are going to go, wow, I believe we're looking at something that was a self-inflicted hell on earth. Mm-hmm. These people have put themselves, because of their connection together, have put themselves into this location and they can't escape it. That's hell to me. That's hell to me. I mean, you want to call it whatever you want to call it. Some people go, well, Stephen, that's purgatory. And I'm like, well, okay, we'll call it purgatory. Whatever you're comfortable calling it. But the fact of the matter is these people are keeping each other there for different reasons. And I thought that was interesting. And that's why I think that haunting is so interesting. Because of the amount of different spirit that's there and how they are not afraid to communicate with you through either EVP, ghost box, whatever, as well. And they're still there. I did some research there this past summer, which I hadn't been in the location since 2006, and actually did some research there. And some of the up-to-date, the ghost box and stuff, it was very interesting. Some of the stuff that went on, and it's still very active, even with all the power off in this building. So I don't know where it's drawing it from, and maybe some limestone there, and maybe there's some underwater things going on. But it was pretty interesting. So, but when you're dealing with a murder such as that is the basis of that. Do you know what I had the most trouble writing in that book, Lisa?
What's that?
The prostitute.
Yeah.
The prostitute, because she was the most innocent of all the characters. I mean, the characters were despicable. I mean, you get in the book, and it's a really rough book to read. I mean, really rough. My son, one of my son calls it my rape book, by the way. But it's really rough because of what happened. But when I got to her, she was the one character that was kind of just in the wrong place at the wrong time. And getting ready to write, knowing where she was headed, she was run over by a truck when she ran out of the restaurant because she had saw something that had frightened her. Knowing where she was going and why she was going there was very difficult to write her because you put yourself in those feelings, because I write story. Story's important to me. And you put yourself in those feelings of why does nobody love me? And then you kill that. I mean, that was very difficult. I had to walk away from it several times.
I think another interesting thing about that haunting, too, is it really does illustrate that you don't always know when you walk in a place that there is going to be a haunting or why. That activity can happen anywhere, and just looking at the surface, you don't really have an idea why.
Mm-hmm.
And
and at that point, I found it very frustrating because I had just met a gentleman on a team, and I had asked him. I said, well, "So what do you do for the team?" And he told me he was the EMF guy. And I found that frustrating because I realized at that moment that what we were doing is we were compartmentalizing ourselves, and that nobody was using the most important thing about a haunting, which is their brain.
right.
Nobody was discussing what they were finding. They were just, give me the evidence, and maybe I'll get on television. It's that sort of thing. And it frustrated me because I'm like, stop. History's important here. And how that history plays in that evidence that you're getting. And you need to sit down and you need to be discussing this and figuring this out for yourself, because it's in that history that you're going to find those answers, damn it. But nobody was paying attention. So I was very angry when I went into that book. I think it shows a little bit, going back and reading it now, because the crazy story, I'm rewriting it because there's some things I've always wanted to do a little different in it. And I'm looking at it, and it's like there's a lot of anger there, and there needed to be, because at that point it was written there was a time when the paranormal as a whole needed a good kick in the ass.
Well, and I think that we get so caught up in evidence and whether it's something that we can document, that we miss the forest for the trees.
Yeah, what are you documenting it for? It's like,
right.
It's like, are you thinking, what are you documenting this for? I mean, this is not good. You're not proving that a haunting exists or not, because nobody's going to believe you if they don't want to. Right. So what are you documenting this for? Well, you're documenting it, it seems to me, to tell these stories and find out how these things happen and how these happen, and most importantly, how this could happen to you.
Very true. And it can happen to anyone.
Hey, Steven, what are your thoughts on groups like TAPS and Ghost Adventures and such groups like that?
Bad question.
I like Jason a lot. Jason's a good guy. Zach, and the other guys, they're good guys too. I think we have to keep in mind, though, that what they're doing is television, you know, is entertainment. I think there's a line that separates, and Zach, don't get mad at me, and I don't mean this in a bad way, that separates real research from television and entertainment. I think, Zach is there to entertain us. He does a good job of it. He does a good job of it.
It is pretty entertaining.
It is very entertaining. I mean, but the week after week after week, and having to produce, if you watch, there's some shows that really, if you took Zach and the guys out of it and just put a regular research team in there, be a very boring show because because nothing happens. They make the show because they make the appearance of something happening, and I think they're very good at what they do. Does it hurt us? To an extent, sometimes, yeah. I got to walk that line. But, to an extent, sometimes it's bad, from the view of the investigator and what we do and what we're trying to do. But I think the benefit from what they're doing far outweighs the bad. Because the truth of the matter is there's an acceptance going on, and I call it a ghost renaissance or a spirit renaissance. There's an acceptance going on in this country that has never happened before. And for the period of time that it has happened, I mean, we've had little snippets, throughout history, but nothing like this. Foreign countries like the English, man, they're so far ahead of us in thought and everything, and then we're so far behind. I think this is bringing us up to the level of everyone else. And it's about damn time it happens. So if that does that one thing, it far outweighs any bad they could do. And I think they need to be patted on the back for that.
I agree there because I think perhaps the entertainment brings in people who would not be watching shows otherwise that can open a few minds a little bit. And I liked your comment about England being farther ahead. It reminds me of a nun I used to know that she was an attorney like I was, and you'd be talking about whatever issue and how much further ahead or progressive, say, Europe was or whatever.
Right.
And she would always say, you have to remember, we are a very young country.
That's what I was going to say, too, is that, they're an older country, right?
And so a longer tradition, dealing with issues a lot longer. And so I think that we kind of suffer from that lack of longevity in our own identity in dealing with some of these issues.
Well, we don't have castles.
We don't have castles.
No guillotines.
Or
That's it. I mean, we don't have castles. We're not cool.
However, we did have the Civil War, folks. The Civil War was a very, somebody asked me about this recently, and I said, why do a lot of American hauntings surround the Victorian period? And I'm like, Civil War. Mm-hmm. I'm like, the one decisive, most violent thing that happened to this country and tore this country apart emotionally, politically, brother against brother, Civil War. You want to talk about a time and a place and things happening that were the perfect recipe for a haunting. The Civil War is it. You know?
Yeah. Well, we see that a lot down here in our neck of Missouri, and just the amount of emotion released and the deprivation to levels that, to be honest, people can't even fathom now.
Right.
I think that is the perfect storm for a haunting. I agree with you there. I think further east you have more things from the colonial period, but I think overall the Civil War probably is the biggest.
I don't know. Go to Gettysburg and tell me about that.
Oh yeah, I mean, love to, and we have a few battlefields around here that have very similar experiences.
Yeah, and I mean, especially Missouri, excuse me.
Now you're acting like a native son.
Yeah, but you look at us, interesting enough, we were really at a cataclysm in this state because half of us were north and half of us were south. Yep. We were the dividing line. And, the thing is so you literally had, and I mean had, brother killing brother, family killing family. Mm-hmm. That right there. You're right. The perfect storm. I mean, look at it. And somebody asked me, why is Missouri so haunted? And I'm like, take a look at this, folks. This is one good reason.
Well, in my book on Southwest Missouri and Civil War ghosts, I go into it. But in this area, there was a scorched earth policy on both sides, and it became depopulated. People left starving, and we can't even conceive of those conditions now, really.
And then there's the other conditions where you had the different things like cholera, TB. Everybody thinks TB happened in Kentucky, by the way. Waverly, there were TB hospitals everywhere, folks.
Oh yeah.
So I mean, life in that period of time was very, very rough. I think sometimes it gets a little glamorized, but it was very rough. I think that's why, we see a lot from that period.
Yeah, I think we do tend to be a very haunted state that we don't have as many of the iconic sites, at least yet, but I think we certainly are growing.
Well, I can name you some.
Yeah, too, but as far as just popular knowledge.
Lisa's house.
Morrisville Hotel, Lisa, come on.
Yeah.
Zombie Road, the Exorcist locations from St. Louis. You name them. Pythian Castle down there by you. Come on, Lisa, you wrote about some. I think those are iconic places. You have a whorehouse down there, don't you?
Well, yeah, it's just over the state line.
Oh, it's not active anymore. Never mind.
All of a sudden it became non-active, right?
Yeah, well, it's pretty active, but
it is.
There's no live action.
Yeah, no.
Yeah. But I mean, stop and consider. I mean, yes, we have iconic hauntings here. They're just as iconic as anyone else. When you stop and think about it, and I don't think we give ourselves credit enough for it. I had why do you think the Booth brothers spent so much time in Missouri? They realized that Missouri, and as a matter of fact, Philip lives here, they realized that it was a very haunted location. And it was a joke. What is happening with you people in Missouri? Why is it always so haunted, And not only that, is you have one of the most iconic hauntings in the history of paranormal events in the world, the St. Louis exorcism case. That's important. That's an important case, whether you like it or not.
Well, and Stephen, you did some work on those locations, didn't you?
Yes, I did. I was one of the first investigators, actually, one of the first investigators in a lot of the locations. Actually, the church brought me into the locations. And I look back at it now, and it was probably not the best time or the best thing for me to be doing. But there was one of the locations that I went to is considered the Holy Grail of that case that no one's ever seen. And you didn't get to see it in Haunted Boy, folks, because I'm one of the few people that know where it is. It's in a hospital. It's on a hospital floor where in 1983 they picked up everything off this hospital floor and left it. It's always been rumored that one of the priests at the end of the exorcism of the boy was, like you saw in The Exorcist, William Peter Blatty did a lot of investigation before he wrote that book, folks. And he there was always that rumor that one of the priests was possessed.
Right.
This hospital floor actually housed a priest until his death. That's the only thing it housed was that priest. The moment of his death, they picked up and they moved. And as a matter of fact, here's the church's views and what the church said. The church said his last words were to a nurse, and he said, "I'm going to kill you, bitch."
Wow.
Very haunted place, very haunted location. Have pictures of it. You don't see it because not many people knew, and they wanted my reaction. I think that was one of the main things. They knew, you live through this haunting, you're living through this haunting. Let's get your reactions, and we want your reaction to this. I think they were looking for some answers of how can we deal with this, because we have this whole floor of this hospital we can't do anything with, and we're hiding it. And I mean, to get up to this floor of the hospital, you went behind a normal door, and then there was this little bitty freight elevator that took you up. I mean, it was very covert, very get smartish, you know. And it was like, you know, because I was like, the main elevators down there, they're like, they open the door and they go, no, we have to go to this one.
How long was the priest there?
He was there from the moment until the end of the exorcism, all the way to his death. And I went back and I looked, and I'm like, okay, let's take the time of the exorcism and go 1983.
Oh, wow.
That would fit. It fits.
Okay.
It fits, you know, and it's like, they're not kidding me, you know. And, you know,
so he was there a very long time then.
Right. Can you imagine what it was like, though? They wouldn't take me all the way to his room. They said that the room, the paranormal activity that was coming from the room, I could not go into the room because it was too much.
Oh, wow.
It protected that room. That room was sealed from people. We get foots of snow.
Yeah,
That's right. Now, Steven, did I hear that you are looking to move again?
I'm buying a house.
Awesome.
I'm buying a house. Everybody was like, Steven, you just moved. And I'm like, yeah, we moved because our lease was up on our apartment. And he didn't like cats anyway, so we moved in a temporary house while I went looking because I decided I wanted to buy. I'm going to buy one of those old brickstone houses in St. Louis, you know, the ones that St. Louis is kind of known for. So I've been out looking like every Wednesday. But I think this Wednesday I might contract a house, so keep your fingers crossed.
Very cool, very cool.
I'm looking at one, Lisa, that's a World's Fair house. 3,000 square feet. It's a World's Fair house, like Meet Me in St. Louis. You ever see Meet Me in St. Louis? Those kind of houses. So
awesome.
Really, really cool. Really cool.
Was around a lot of those when I went to law school up there. So
you know what I'm talking about, you know.
Yeah.
So I'm looking at everything from the brick bungalows to those type of houses. So.
Good evening. This is Paranormal Science Lab Live. I'm Lisa.
I'm John.
And we are pleased to have with us tonight Steven LaChance. Steven, how are you doing?
I'm doing great. How are you all? Kind of snowy here.
Yeah, we're in Arctic temperatures and sleet and snow.
Okay, it was negative 11 wind chill, and it's sleeting and snowing outside and acting crazy.
Yeah, I know. It's like, we're in March, folks.
Yeah, but around here we've been known to get 27 inches of snow in March. So
I know, people forget that up here too in St. Louis. They think, okay, it's March, it's time for spring, and it's like, no, don't you remember? I do.
Hey, a comment from the chat room, Steven, is that we hope the new house isn't haunted. Assuming you're going to have to check.
Everybody says it. They think that if you manage to find a haunted house one time, you're going to find it again. Which the truth of the matter is there's some truth to that. I was at a house this past Wednesday, and we walked in, and I had two real estate agents with me. I had mine, and she had a gentleman she was trading. And we walked by this closet, and the closet door opened in front of us. And I looked at him and shook my head no. And this guy, he was closing the closet, opened it, closing the closet, open. And I was just like, no, they have, it was letting me know it was there, so no, we're not going to do that one. But, chances are, with that kind of home, you're looking at homes that were built in, the late 1800s, early 1900s in St. Louis, because we don't tear anything down, we renovate everything. So is the possibility there? Sure. Is it a possibility that would be haunted? I don't mind a ghost. Just don't give me no demons.
Yeah.